Hi, this is Brian Kim. I'm going to share with you case number 205 in the best way to do cataract surgery series. This is a small pupil, and you're going to see double chop, cross chop, mechanical fracturing techniques, and how I'm able to efficiently disassemble the lens by leveraging mechanical fracturing forces, hooking the peripheral lens with the chopper very carefully and safely by using the chopper to pull lens pieces up out of the bag. This is very well controlled and safe. And at the end of this, you're going to see Hydrus microstent placement. So you can see this is a fairly small pupil. Use a cotton tip to steady the eye. Use a corneal marker, which will help me to center and size the rexus. Using the cotton tip to immobilize the eye, turn it away towards the left side of the screen. Make my paracentesis incision on the right side. And this is the incision for the Hydrus microstent on the right side as well, pointed towards the contralateral angle. And this is the incision for the left side, making sure I'm parallel to iris plane, which creates a nice corneal shelf, which will allow me to achieve a self-sealing incision. This is intracameral epinephrine, and then some dispersive viscoelastic to coat the corneal endothelium, and also to flatten the anterior capsule, as well as viscodilate. And this is a triplanar corneal incision. I make a vertical groove, place the blade into the deep part of the groove, tunnel, and then I enter. Go in with these micro forceps, go in sideways, puncture the center, pulling down towards me, pushing to the right side to create a flap, going around circumferentially. With these micro forceps, the risk for OVD egress is much lower. I have very good control. Risk for radialization forces is also lower as well. I'm using the corneal mark that I made as a guide for the size and centration of the rexus. Finish off the rexus, burp some viscoelastic out. And this is the capsule fornix hydrodissection technique. I place a cannula under the rexus edge, contra-incisionally, making sure I get under the rexus edge, point the tip down, get a nice wave, decompress the bag, sweeping underneath the rexus edge and freeing up the anterior capsule first on the left side and then the right side, and the lens begins to spin. Irrigating the surface of the eye, lifting the incision with a chopper, going in with irrigation off to minimize Descemet's trauma, removing the surface epinuclear material. And you want to be mindful because the pupil is smaller here. So place the chopper under the rexus edge contra-incisionally, the phaco tip vertically sub-incisionally, bringing the instruments together, fracturing the lens in half. That is double chop, placing the chopper, sliding it under the rexus edge around the right heminucleus, hooking the peripheral lens, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip, and then fracturing the lens against the phaco tip, and that is a cross chop. Using some vacuum to lift that first quadrant up, and then crushing it between the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens piece. So again, nothing wrong with using vacuum, especially when it pops up very easily. Again, my chopping and fracturing maneuvers loosen the lens enough, so using vacuum is okay in that context. It's when I'm talking about you have trouble getting pieces up out of the bag with vacuum. You shouldn't be perseverating and going deeper and deeper into the bag trying to grab lens pieces. Turning the second heminucleus in front of me, placing the chopper around the lens, hooking the peripheral lens, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip, fracturing the lens in half, doing the same thing around that third quadrant. And by fracturing it, you can see the fragment is already coming up out of the bag, and then I emulsify the lens piece. Placing the chopper around the last quadrant, hooking the peripheral lens, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip. Using the phaco tip as a chopping block, I'm able to fracture the lens effectively. And now essentially I just have epinucleus. I pull the epinucleus, pulling from anterior to posterior, and it prolapses and collapses the epinucleus into the phaco tip with high vacuum. Using the chopper to break it up into smaller pieces, protecting the posterior capsule with the chopper as the epinucleus comes out. So again, very efficient, safe, and really a no-fuss way to disassemble the lens in the context of a small pupil. So I take the chopper out, push BSS in, take the phaco tip out, and I go in with the INA handpiece. I always start sub-incisionally, removing the cortex from anterior to posterior, peeling it anterior to posterior. And by doing it this way, you get a cleaner removal of the cortex. It's like peeling a banana. You want to start from one end and then go all the way on the other side. And by going from anterior to posterior, you're making sure you're peeling the anterior as well as any forniceal cortex that's stuck there, because it will go through the forniceal cortex and then go around towards the posterior cortex. Go ahead and polish the posterior capsule as well, polishing under the rexus edge as well in polish mode. And you're able to more confidently polish into the capsule fornix using polish mode. It's been fairly clean here. Go in with the cohesive viscoelastic to fill the capsular bag. I disengage the fluid because I don't want to encourage any iris prolapse as I come out. And you saw that I skipped the sweeping part because the pupil is small. I go in with a single piece acrylic lens. I turn the eye away from me so I can see the contralateral rexus, making sure the lens goes within the bag and underneath the rexus edge. I'm disengaging the haptics from the optic and turning it with the cannula. With that same cannula, I go ahead and fill the angle and then put some cohesive viscoelastic on the cornea. I'm turning the eye for the Hydrus now. So I turn the eye away from me, making sure that the approach is good, making sure my stent is good. And once I'm good and I'm having a perpendicular approach, I'm able to have my gonio lens into view. You want to make sure both are good before you proceed. I stab the anterior TM, advance the Hydrus with the roller, flatten out, withdraw, making sure you disengage completely, and then using the tip of it like a shovel and pushing the notch to encourage the stent to go in further. Go in with irrigation off, activate irrigation, tilting the lens up, removing the viscoelastic from within the bag, repositing the optic. You can see the microstent there, polishing underneath the rexus edge, removing the viscoelastic from the anterior chamber, and then I'll hydrate my incisions. You're going to see there's quite a bit of good blanching of the conjunctival vessels in the area of the stent. So again, this is a small pupil. Again, when patients have small pupils, they tend to use pupil expanding devices. There's nothing wrong with that, but even those things require more maneuvering. Again, a principle of surgery is the more stuff you do to the eye, the more chances that something can go wrong. And so it's an issue of then, okay, well, but if you skip certain steps that are going to make the surgery more risky, you shouldn't do that either. And so that's an important step as well. That's an important principle as well. You want to maximize your safety, and if those other things will help your safety, then by all means do it. So then it comes down to the risk reward. Yeah, you're doing more manipulation, but it's worth it because it's going to provide you more safety. But that's because you're doing a surgery a certain way, and you depend upon seeing the pupil being huge so you can see the entire lens. You're grabbing lens pieces, lollipopping it. Well, if you have a soft lens, the lens pieces fall apart and you won't have much lens to remove using high vacuum. That's called the dreaded bowl out situation. That simply reflects the fact that you have to depend upon using high vacuum to grab pieces up out of the bag. And why do it that way if there's a different way? And so again, with my technique, I know that I'm getting into the bag without being outside of the bag with the chopper, because I've done this technique thousands of times and I know what I'm doing. I'm able to disassemble the lens using mechanical forces very confidently and easily. And I'm able to hook the lens pieces up out of the bag with the chopper rather than going after with high vacuum, which is more risky and dangerous. Again, the risk may be low, but even if it's a 5% risk, it's certainly higher than the 0% risk, because if I don't use high vacuum, I have zero risk. And so that's why I feel like this is the best way to do cataract surgery. Please learn how to use the chopper, leverage it, being able to be comfortable and confident, hooking the lens pieces up out of the bag, getting around the lens equator, fracturing the lens pieces, popping them up out of the bag. And this is why I feel like this is the best way to do cataract surgery, especially in a small pupil situation. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I thank you for your attention.